Robservations with Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right. That's me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Robcasting you Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 618. It's the show about something after all. And as many of you might know, I just got off the latest episode of Fully Articulated, and I found out that when I got off the stream, there was a package. There was a package waiting for me, and I thought I would start this show by opening the package up with all of you. You will be witnesses. I know you're thinking, is it an action figure? Might it be Blu-rays? What is it? Well, here it is. Here is the package. Oop, I just showed my address. That was dumb. Well, frame grab that shit. Come by my house. I don't know what to say. That was not smart. But anyway, I'll cut it out later. But anyway, so this package, I was waiting for this package, and I would have opened it on Fully Articulated, but I'm going to open it with you here now. And this package, it came all the way from Italy. And I'm looking for, as I opening up, I've opened it up. I'm going to take this out so you can all see it, because I think that this is exactly the kind of thing. Like, I don't know how many people on YouTube, I guarantee you, how many people on YouTube would even have what I'm about to open. I don't know. Well, wait, where is it? Have I gotten everything? Is everything out of here? I don't think it has. So here's what it is. Look at this. Here is what came in the package. First of all, a certificate of authenticity. It came with that. And it also came with this. I know you might be saying to yourself, is that a crack vial? It is not. It is not. But you know what it is? What is in this vial that I could have possibly ordered all the way from Italy? Well, if you are a Quentin Tarantino fan, and I know many people are, here, my friends, is a pack of red apple cigarettes. A 1/6 scale pack of red apple cigarettes, all the way from a gentleman's Etsy store. I kid you not. I got them to go with my John Travolta figure from Pulp Fiction. That's what I got. And also, in addition to the red apple cigarettes, I guess it'd be hard to get them out of here. I guess I would have to use some kind of device. But take it from me, there are 1/6 scale cigarettes in various stages of being smoked in this container. That's how I roll. That's what I have. And I love the fact that the artist who was in Italy sent in their actual certificate of authenticity. I guess that would be also in 6 scale that you could hang it up. So there you go, people. How fun is that? How much fun is that? I have 1/6 scale red apple cigarettes. And I think that's pretty amazing. Anyway, this is Robservations episode number 618. And you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on today in the world of genre entertainment, but something which always fascinates me. So for those of you who might not know, when you are going to say, let's say you want to adapt your favorite book, pick your favorite book. I don't know, The Stand. The Stand just wrapped up. You want to adapt The Stand. So there's a number of things that you have to do. And one of the things, the thing that you're looking to achieve is something called chain of title. Or let's say you find a great screenplay that a friend of yours wrote, or somebody that you didn't know, but you read their script and you thought it was great. One of the very first things that a great Hollywood producer has to do is establish a clear chain of title for whatever it is you want to make. Now, what that means is essentially the ownership of that piece of material, whether it's a book, a short story, a magazine article, a screenplay. You have to show ownership before you can actually make it. Clear chain of title. So the way you do that is usually you do what's called you option the material. So basically you have a contract between you and whatever the thing is you're going to option, whether it's an author's book or a short story, a magazine article, a screenplay. You make a contract, which is an option agreement. And basically the option is an option to buy it eventually. But this is just an option, so you might have, let's call it an 18-month option. So you might pay the rights holder a certain amount of money for the sake of argument. Let's just say $1,000 or $5,000. Let's make it $1,000 and keep it easy. And then you negotiate a short form, usually a short form agreement of the basic bullet points of the deal. So the idea is, and the biggest thing that you negotiate in an option is the floor and the ceiling of what the purchase price of whatever the material is. So what that means is, so say it's a novel, it could be based on the budget. If you're going to make the movie for $100 million, the ceiling of how much you're going to buy the material for is high. But if you're going to make it for $1 million, then the ceiling is low and the floor is, so the floor is at whatever the minimum payment is. So say you're going to buy a book. Let's just make it easy. Let's say you're going to buy a book from Stephen King. But forget that he's rich and famous, Stephen King. He's just Stephen King. Forget there's any movies made. So for Stephen King, you're like, I read the book Rage, which is the first of the Bachman books. It hasn't been made into a movie. And you go, Mr. King, I want to make this. I would like to option this book for 18 months. So what you're doing is you're optioning that material and you pay Stephen King $1,000. So basically, you've now bought yourself 18 months to try and get the movie made. He won't allow anyone else to do that. You can shop it around. You can do what you want. And in that option agreement, it states that if the movie gets made at a certain budget level, Stephen King will be paid, let's say, $500,000 for the rights to his book. You are buying the book from him for $500,000, and you're giving him the $500,000. If the movie's made for $50 million, then he gets, let's say, $1 million or $2 million, whatever it is. He gets $2 million, whatever. That's the purchase price. That means you're going to exercise the option and buy the material, in which case you're going to make the movie. And as long as all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, you can show what's called chain of title, which means your option agreement was on the up and up. Everything that you negotiated was proper. That's why you need a good entertainment lawyer. And then when it came time, you got the money after 18 months to make the film. You then were going to buy the material from Stephen King for either $500,000 or $1 million or whatever. And everything was papered. The deals were papered correctly. And then you have clean chain of title that shows you own whatever the material is you wanted to make. And it's true of everything. Look, oversimplification, but that's it in a nutshell. The important lesson here is to make sure that all of this paperwork was in order and it was properly executed. Everybody who had to sign it had to sign it. All the parties agreed on everything. So then what happens is when you are going to go to your financier or a studio or whatever, you need to present this material to show that, yes, in fact, you do own this book. So now we can make Stephen King's novel Rage, the first of the Bachman books, into a movie because you have clear chain of title. It's a very simple thing, but sometimes you'd be surprised how many times in Hollywood find out what happened to the modern remake of Dukes of Hazzard. Just make sure that you have clear chain of title. That's producing 101. Very important. So today, in the Hollywood Reporter, there was a very interesting article that I wanted to share with you. And I would like to show this to you. I was shocked by this. Look at this. Judge can't figure out who owns rights to the Jack Ryan character. Now, for those of you keeping score at home, Jack Ryan is, of course, the character created by author Tom Clancy, and the first Jack Ryan novel was The Hunt for Red October, and Alec Baldwin played the character in that 1990 movie. Alec Baldwin was later replaced by Harrison Ford, who played Jack Ryan in both Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger. Then the role was recast again as Ben Affleck in The Sum of All Fears. And then, of course, Chris Pine played him in Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit. And, of course, John Krasinski now plays the character of Jack Ryan on the Jack Ryan series on Amazon. So, a lot of different Jack Ryans there. Mace Neufeld owned the Jack Ryan character. Now, of course, John Clark, who's now being played by Michael B. Jordan. John Clark was previously played by Willem Dafoe and Liev Schreiber. Willem Dafoe in Clear and Present Danger and Liev Schreiber in Some of All Fears. Now John Clark is Michael B. Jordan in the upcoming, Amazon purchased it, Without Remorse. Anyway, it all began with one book, Hunt for Red October, written by Tom Clancy. Well, what I found really interesting was this article. As somebody who is a student of Hollywood and somebody who also has had to acquire things and made sure my chain of title was clean, I read this headline and I was like, oh my God, how could this happen? How could a judge not figure out who owns the rights to Jack Ryan? How is that possible? So I delved into it. Now, what's really interesting about Jack Ryan is the first people to publish the first Jack Ryan novel, Hunt for Red October, was the Navy, the U.S. Navy. It was released in a small run by the Navy before it achieved worldwide success. But anyway, let's delve into this, shall we? Consider it miraculous that Tom Clancy's CIA character of Jack Ryan has appeared so often in movies and a recent Amazon Prime show starring John Krasinski. That's because this literary creation, first seen in The Hunt for Red October, has prompted an ownership dispute for the ages. On Wednesday, a federal judge in Maryland took a crack at unwinding the situation, but after 89 pages of backstory and legal discussion, got no closer to finding an answer on who really owns the rights to Jack Ryan, and a trial may be coming. Although there's a lot to take from the summary judgment opinion of U.S. District Attorney Judge Ellen Hollander, read in full below, we'll narrow the focus as best we can to Jack Ryan, giving his enduring place in popular culture. The dispute involves a disagreement with the U.S. military, a divorce, a death, and enough paperwork to curdle the blood of any non-lawyer. In 1984, Tom Clancy's The Hunt for Red October came out. The book was published by the United States Naval Institute, which quickly licensed a theatrical film from Paramount Pictures. Based on the success, Clancy got to work on more stories about Jack Ryan. The author would start a company called Jack Ryan Enterprises Limited, and license Paramount to make more Jack Ryan films based on Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games. But in 1987, in the midst of negotiations between Clancy and Viacom for a television series based on Patriot Games, a dispute rose over the ownership of the Jack Ryan character. This was 34 years ago. Had Clancy retained the rights to Jack Ryan in his contract for The Hunt for Red October with the Naval Institute, who first published the book? Had Clancy kept rights because he allegedly developed the character in Patriot Games first? Those questions were briefly entertained in a proceeding before the American Arbitration Association before the two sides settled. Clancy gave $125,000 to the Naval Institute, which in return agreed to reassign the copyright to The Hunt for Red October to Clancy's Jack Ryan Enterprises. Okay, what's really important here is it doesn't really go into the actual deal points, but apparently in order to get Hunt for Red October published, Jack Ryan, the character, and certain rights were turned over by Tom Clancy to the Navy, the Naval Institute, small press, whatever. Now, by the way, for you lawyers out there, and for you, especially you writers, never turn over the rights of your creation to a publisher. Never. A publisher is a publisher, but you retain the rights. It's good to know moving forward. So anyway, there was a dispute because of disagreements or whatever. So this is a classic case of muddying the clear chain of title. Somehow, even back in 87, they were developing a TV series and who owned the characters. There was some kind of shenanigans. These kinds of things should be cut and dried, but they are not. They are not, because it ain't show friends. It is show business, and everyone is trying to get into your business, especially if you've written a book that's a bestseller. But in 1987, in the midst of negotiations between Clancy and Viacom for a television series based on Patriot Games, not even Hunt for Red October, but Patriot Games, a dispute arose over ownership of the Jack Ryan character. Had Clancy retained the rights to Jack Ryan in his contract for the Hunt for Red October with the Naval Institute? Because what they were doing was they were getting a contract probably for the book, but not necessarily the character himself. Because the book was the book, but you're not thinking, oh, the main character of this book, or one of the main characters, is going to now become the star of a franchise. Had Clancy kept rights because he allegedly developed the character in Patriot Games first? Well, it says in 87, in the midst of negotiations between Clancy and Viacom for Patriot Games, whereas he sold the book Hunt for Red October in 84. So was he writing multiple books with the Jack Ryan character? We don't know. Had Clancy kept the rights because he allegedly developed the character in Patriot Games first? Those questions were briefly entertained in a proceeding before the American Arbitration Association before the two sides settled. Clancy gave $125,000 to the Naval Institute, which in return agreed to reassign the copyright to Hunt for Red October to Clancy's company. So he owned it. Should be no problem. Any question? Jack Ryan character, owned by Clancy. Thereafter, Clancy and his then wife, Wanda King, formed Jack Ryan Limited Partnership, which basically became the family's book business. That makes sense. You're sharing everything with your wife. You start a business, your character, it's yours, which basically became the family's book business. Clancy was technically an employee of the partnership. So Tom Clancy, even though he sets up, when you have an LLC or an employee of your own LLC, it pays you out. Clancy was technically an employee of the partnership, which made publishing and licensing deals with other people. And then, in the mid-90s, when Clancy split from his wife, King, he formed yet another company called Rubicon. I just want to point out, already, there's a hole in the side of the hull, and the boat is filling with water. Rights were divided and assigned throughout the years, although a degree of confusion has long lingered. For example, in 2008, when Paramount announced it was developing a new movie titled Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, Clancy's then agent Michael Ovitz wrote to him, "The problem with all of this is that you have no legal way to stop them from using your Jack Ryan character, because long before I met you, prior representatives gave away the rights to use Jack Ryan to Paramount at their discretion, without your permission or involvement." This is why you need a good entertainment lawyer. If that wasn't enough, when Clancy passed away in 2013 at the age of 66, Alexandra Clancy, the author's second wife and widow, stepped forward to assert that ownership rights belonged to the estate. And with agreements then being made for posthumous work, including new Jack Ryan books, she also served notices of termination with the intent of recapturing the rights to The Hunt for Red October after 35 years. In short, the rights to Clancy's work, having gone through one contract after another and then divorce and then death and possibly more, was a complete mess, instigating lawsuits. So what could have been a clear chain of title, and all of you budding producers out there, a clear chain of title is something you must aspire to. It is holier than holy. Make sure that you always have a clear chain of title. In her decision this week, Judge Hollander tackles various questions ranging from statute of limitations on claims of ownership to whether a work for hire is precluded when an employee also owns the employer. She does rule that Clancy validly assigned rights to works, though it hardly answers the nearly 35-year-old question of ownership of the Jack Ryan character. Had the settlement between Clancy and the Naval Institute achieved assignment of character rights? What if the Naval Institute never owned that? Now, see, what's really interesting here is, I would imagine, when the Naval Institute acquired The Hunt for Red October, it was acquiring the book. And that what was in the book, we're publishing the book, and there was never thought as to, because, back then, who thought that the Jack Ryan character would have such life? That Jack Ryan would eventually become president of the United States in executive orders, which, by the way, is a badass book. I read all the Jack Ryan books, and I've read most of the John Clark books, of which ones I know of. So, but they probably didn't have they didn't carve out some side deal for the Jack Ryan character. So, had the settlement between Clancy and the Naval Institute achieved assignment of character rights? Probably not. What if the Naval Institute never owned that? Well, they probably didn't. Hollander acknowledges that characters may be protected independent of stories when they are especially distinctive, but that doesn't decide ownership over Jack Ryan, given the ambiguity of agreements. The settlement contains specific language about character rights. The transfer agreements did not. Because why would they? You're not going into a book and going through every different element. You're optioning the book, whatever's in the book. But you don't think that one character in the book is going to become the lead of a bunch of other books. Why would you think that? Because only one book had been written. So nowadays, people would anticipate, like, well, what about this main character? Like, what could it be in other books? Like, we should take care of that. But back then, in 84, what is that, 37 years ago, nobody was thinking that when the Naval Institute made some agreement. But anyway, after the divorce, Clancy wrote 7 novels featuring Jack Ryan without agreement with, objection by, or payment to the Jack Ryan entities. So basically, even his own company that he'd set up with his wife, that he was an employee of, he's writing Jack Ryan books that they didn't properly oversee. This states one section of the very long opinion. The fact that he was able to use the Jack Ryan character in these novels supports the view that the provision in the separation agreement confirmed Clancy's retention of ownership of the Jack Ryan character, as the plaintiff argues. But as defendants contend, it could also establish that their company, the Jack Ryan company that his wife and Tom Clancy set up, they owned the Jack Ryan character, but that Clancy had the right to use the character in his work as a result of the grant of authorization in the separation agreement. In sum, the sources on which both parties rely support their particular interpretations of the agreement, but they are not dispositive. After several dozen pages, basically the only thing the judge can conclude is that a reasonable jury could differ on what the evidence suggests. As such, without settlement, this one appears to be headed to trial. Let's see if there's more to this. Nope. I'm going to put this in there so you can read the entire thing. Now, what's amazing about this, and this harks back to the ownership of comic book characters or a million other things. There you go. There's the decision. Is here's an author. Let's say you are an author, and you've written a book like The Hunt for Red October, and you create all these characters, but specifically one particular character. It's your book. You own it. But because it ain't show friends and it's show business, and because you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Every single deal, that you do, whether you're setting up your own LLC to manage your affair, whatever it is you're doing, it's of paramount importance. It's of paramount importance to make sure that you get what you negotiate. You have to be very, very clear, and you have to be very careful that even though you've owned something, that you own it. It's yours. You made it up. But when you make that deal, when somebody comes and options your property, options your story, you need to make sure that everything you do is copacetic, all on the up and up. You make sure that you are not giving away rights to your character. If you're going to publish a book through the naval press or any small press, you give them the option to publish your book, but they don't own anything in it beyond that. All of these things have to be taken into consideration before you do it. So you'd think we now have 5 Tom Clancy, well, if you include Without Remorse, 6 feature films. There was an old Tom Clancy TV series. Now you've got the John Clark film Without Remorse coming out with Michael B. Jordan on Amazon. I mean, Tom Clancy became a franchise industry unto himself. But he, through his own marriage and starting his own companies, he muddied his own waters. He made sure his chain of title was no longer clear. So the idea that somebody is arguing over Tom Clancy did in fact write The Hunt for Red October. He did in fact write the novels Patriot Games and Debt of Honor and Executive Orders and The Bear and the whatever it's called, The Bear and the Panda, the Bear and the Dragon, was that it? All of the Jack Ryan books. He created him. He made him. It made him up. It's his stuff. No one disputes that. But when you start assigning rights and doing things, it muddies the chain of title, which you do not want to happen ever. Ever. Therein lies death. So right now, nobody knows, as I would assume that they're going to do a 3rd season of Jack Ryan, a judge can't figure out who owns this character. You'd think it would be simple and cut and dried, which it would be if everybody has things, remember this, creators out there. If somebody options your project, always build in some kind of a reversion clause where it reverts back to you. All the rights revert back to you after a certain time. And make sure it sticks. Get that, because you deserve a reversion clause, because there is no reason why you shouldn't own your own creation, nor the estate that you've created, nor your family. It should be always in the family, and you should own it. But not now. I mean, you'd think Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan? No one knows who owns him? This, my friends, should never happen. Hopefully, if you have a good entertainment lawyer, it won't happen to you. But it is fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. And I read this, and I'm like, wow. And this isn't chump change either. This is very lucrative stuff, and it's pretty amazing. I read this, and I was what my favorite word from England or the UK. I was gobsmacked when I read this. I was like, how can this be? For he is the Kwisatz Haderach. But no, it's very, very strange. But it's the importance of It Ain't Show Friends. It's show business. So anyway, speaking of chain of title, let's talk about the Snyder Cut. This comes from Michael Johnson. This is just a very small one, very small, quick, to the point. With the Snyder Cut coming out, there's 3 other movies I think should get a second shot. The first is Tim Pope's Crow sequel, City of Angels. Second is Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. And last, of course, is David Ayer's Suicide Squad. That comes in from Michael Johnson. Well, now that's very interesting. First of all, I have seen Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. It exists. I saw it at the New Beverly, so you can watch it from beginning to end. What that is. It's Kill Bill 1 and 2 put together into one film. It's called Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. It's got some different little things in it, but it exists. There is a negative for it, some kind of negative that they made a print off of it, so it exists. And it was great. I loved it. And it didn't feel long at all, actually, when I watched it. Now, Tim Pope's The Crow City of Angels. Now, I don't know much about the history of... Tim Pope, who did a lot of photography for like The Cure and album covers and things like that, directed that film. I hated The Crow City of Angels. As a matter of fact, I didn't just hate it. I hated it with every fiber of my being. And that's not to take something away from Mr. Pope. I thought the movie wasn't very good. I didn't like it at all. But that's okay. So I don't know. Was it interfered with? Maybe it was worth doing. From my perspective, I would be very hard pressed to be convinced that needs to be reconstituted. And last, of course, is David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Now, as we've talked about on the show, Suicide Squad was deeply, deeply, deeply compromised by a studio, Warner Brothers, that got cold feet. And both Batman v Superman, Justice League, and Suicide Squad suffered because of studio, fear. They didn't know. They lost faith in their filmmakers, and they took both movies away from the directors, both Justice League and Suicide Squad. And to a certain extent, Batman v Superman was meddled with after the fact because the studio mandated a certain length for the film, so it had to be cut down. But, again, would David Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad be any better? I don't know. I do know that with Justice League, there was a clear demarcation point between the originator of that franchise and Joss Whedon, who took over. So it makes sense to have a Snyder Cut. I don't know if Suicide Squad, because Suicide Squad did okay. I mean, for a property that people don't know, it did okay at the box office. So I don't know if we'll ever get an Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, because it made $700 million. Although I'd like to see that, because I found that movie incredibly difficult to watch because it's edited with chainsaw. I couldn't get past it. It was just awful. So maybe, but I just don't look. I think the Snyder Cut is unique unto itself. There's a whole slew of reasons why I believe that, and you guys probably all know most of them. But I think that, yes, it is a... I don't think it's par for the course. I don't like it as a precedent. I think it's unique to the Snyder Cut. I don't think every movie should suddenly, what about the cut of this, or what about the cut of that? Most movies wind up in the theater. Like, look, Tango Shalom, if I can mention Tango Shalom, my own movie that I produced and edited, when we were editing it, we took out a lot of stuff. We honed it down, and I will tell you, the movie that you're going to see, if you live in the San Diego area, you can virtually see Tango Shalom at home if you go to the San Diego International Jewish Film Festival. Anyone who lives in the San Diego area right now can watch Tango Shalom. And then in a couple days, if you live near Charlotte, North Carolina, I don't know how far out, it's geo-blocked, but you can sign up and see Tango Shalom there. But the version of Tango Shalom that we made, it's the best version of the film. I mean, for what it is, there's no way we could have made it better. It is the definitive version of the movie. So it depends. I mean, it depends. I think that the Suicide Squad thing, does it need to happen? I don't know. Is the film that significantly different? I think the thing about the Snyder Cut, the thing that's different about the Snyder Cut is you had Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and then it was leading into Justice League, and half of it was done by Zack Snyder, and he was replaced. And it finishes a trilogy. It's part of a triptych, and it has been up to this point unfinished because the Justice League that came out is such a deeply compromised vision that I think everybody would rather have the Snyder Cut, if only so you can watch Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and the Snyder Cut and see if it holds together as a trilogy. I think that's all part of the appeal. So I think it's unique. It's not like everybody's not going to have that situation. So, and I think that needs to be sort of understood, because a lot of people think, well, we're going to have cuts of all these different movies. But I don't think all movies warrant them, and I think the Snyder Cut is unique. Ooh, this next one comes from Undead Sick. Undead Sick writes in, "Hello, Rob. Let me start this letter by saying that one of the things I love most about your channel is your passion and devotion for Star Trek. And I think your rants, reviews, and discussions are always amazing to me. I can already imagine the look on your face when I say this, but I'm actually a big fan of present-day Star Trek. You are welcome to be a fan of present-day Star Trek. I do not begrudge you that. And remember, this is coming from someone who has seen all the previous Star Trek. That said, I thought Season 3 of Discovery was very disappointing. And I wanted to give you my humble review as a sort of test to see what you think about my feedback on the show, and I'm curious to see if you agree with me. We shall see. First of all, I'd like to say that I applaud what Season 3 tried to do. I will grant you that. I was very excited to see what they were doing. Taking it out of the continuity and moving it away from canon was a bold and brave move that needed to happen because the fans felt like Discovery was riding on the previous success of old and familiar storytelling and characters. So throwing it 900 plus years into the future was a good thing, in my opinion. I also liked most of the new characters like Cleveland Booker and Admiral Vance. I also found the addition of new technology and creatures very intriguing. The big problem with Season 3 came, for me, from something else. The moment the season came to a close, it felt very unsatisfying and kind of anticlimactic. And I think the biggest issue that created the problem for me was the whole mystery of the burn. When the season started out, I thought, well, this was a cool MacGuffin that had a lot of potential, but by the time you find out what's what, you don't really care anymore because, first of all, the season had so many different plot points that it was hard to keep track of the mystery itself. Secondly, by the time of the origin of the burn is revealed, it comes completely out of left field and was something that wasn't set up at all in the previous episodes. It feels very weird and unconnected with the rest of the puzzle pieces we'd been given in the rest of the season. To me, it felt like they wanted to make Season 3 a very dark and bitter espresso with lots of flavor, but it ended up being a mediocre cappuccino. Also, like I said before, the season just had too much going on. It seems like they had 100 ideas and they failed to put it in the blender and make it into one delicious cocktail. I love the fact. Let me just cheers to you for the alcohol references. I chose to drink wine today because I can. Because I can adult when I want to. Things like the burn, Filippo Georgiou's condition, which in a vacuum was actually resolved pretty well, the Emerald Chain, the new Starfleet that goes along with the new universe, and then, of course, the new characters. These are all great ideas. Were they? I'll grant you that, though. In your mind, they are. These are all great ideas, but I feel like they just threw all of this to the wall and just hoped it would stick. Personally, I think it would have worked better if they'd just taken 2 or 3 ideas and wrote the story around it. Yes, you are correct. That's why Season 1 and 2 work for me. At the end of the day, it felt easy, comfort food. That's what it was. In closing, I applaud the new direction they wanted to take. There are some interesting things, and the graphics are beautiful as always. Are they, though? Are they? Damn well if it ain't pretty. But in the end, the story is where Season 3 suffers, and I just thought it was very mediocre. If I had to give it a rating, I would give Season 3 of Discovery a big C-. Here's hoping Season 4 will be better. It won't be. Keep up your great work, and greetings from Holland. Undead Sick. Well, God damn it, Undead Sick. I love the Dutch. I love Holland. I've been there. I love Dutch films. I love Monique van de Ven and Renee Stausendijk. Those are actresses, by the way. Actresses. Look, I feel the same way that you do. I feel that look, one of the jobs of a television writing staff is to chart the course of a season. You need a great showrunner with very strong ideas who has a great staff that he or she can delegate to and trust to flesh out a season of television based on where the showrunner would like to take the series. That's basically how TV works. Star Trek, modern Star Trek, the single problem with modern Star Trek is the people in charge are basically not very creative. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you're going to, make a science fiction show. Let's say let's play a little exercise. You play along with me at home right now. Now, you decide that, okay, we don't want to be, obviously we have no canonical fealty to the original Star Trek, even though we're supposed to be taking place basically in the same era, within a decade of the beginning of the original series. But we want to forget all that. We want to go into the future, and we want to have our adventures there, so we're completely removed from canon. That's what we want to do. Okay, so what a writer's room would do is you have to figure out, what is this milieu that we're working in? Where are we going? So we're going to go 1,000 years in the future. Okay, so now basically we're going to rebuild Star Trek from scratch, the entire mythology. So we're going to go 1,000 years in the future. We're going to extrapolate. Okay, what's that going to be like? What kind of a universe do we want to find? Now, somebody, like, they wanted it because all anybody knows is, well, it's dystopian. Which, well, first of all, right then and there, you've lost me, because Star Trek is not dystopian. So, really, if you're not going into a bold, bright future, you're not doing a Star Trek story. Now, a bold, bright future can be 1,000 years from now is going to be very different. So, rather than go into a future that is almost so advanced as to be alien, like, what would be interesting is if you take the old Arthur C. Clarke adage that sufficiently advanced technology to primitive peoples would appear as magic. I would have taken that route, where 1,000 years from now, humanity is completely transformed, very unrecognizable, along with the rest of the galaxy, and our characters are fish out of water. They're way out of their depth. But the decision was made to make it dystopian, which, by the way, for the record, is completely anti-Star Trek. The milieu of Star Trek was not dystopian. The milieu of Star Trek is one of hope, one of where humanity had triumphed. And when we go out amongst the stars, then we can find dystopian civilizations. But our civilization isn't dystopian. That's the whole point. And so to go in and decide to make your Star Trek future dystopian is to undermine what Star Trek is at the DNA level. You have failed already. Now, I understand, well, we have to give all this conflict to make it real. Okay. So let's say you're going to go the dystopian route. They went the most boring, obvious, stupid. I've seen this 100,000 times before. There's an evil force. There's a criminal element that's running the future because it's dystopian now. Gosh, I've never heard that before. Whether it's the Lord Humongous, or whether it's the Emerald Chain. Having a criminal organization of outlaws and bad people control the future, and so you have a built-in villain, is the laziest, the most well-trodden, the dumbest idea for a Star Trek show ever. And a science fiction show, it's borderline criminal because it requires no thought. You're not writing speculative fiction. You're going back in time you're basically writing a Western. It has nothing to do with science fiction. It has nothing to do with Star Trek. And it's just fucking dumb. And that's what they did. Because, we're going to make it a dystopian future to give it all conflict. To me, I would say, you lose. You've lost. You're uncreative, unimaginative, and fucking bad writers. You have done nothing with the idea of science fiction, and basically you've created something that's generic. We have a generic crime boss. And then what do? So, first of all, epic fail. You failed. It's a failure of imagination, a failure of show running, a failure of Star Trek. You failed. But okay, now you're going to move forward. So then you come up with, well, we have to figure out a reason. Why did the galaxy fall? Why did it fall apart? Ooh, this thing called the burn. The propulsion, it's let's see, what if like, it'll be like Mad Max, there's no more gas. So what's gas in a starship? Oh yeah, it's dilithium. What if there's no more dilithium? Again, epic fail, stupid, dumb, you have no imagination, and basically you're going back, it is once again your Road Warrior future. You've now writ it large in the future, the dumbest thing ever. As if dilithium technology is the same 1,000 years from now. Oh, wait, you failed again. You failed again. Your premise of going into a thousand years in the future is monumentally stupid on just about every single level. Every single level. Because what you're doing is you're telling a story that is not a Star Trek story. It's No Blade of Grass. If you've ever seen that movie based on John Christopher, who wrote the Tripods book, The Death of Grass. I mean, it's so dumb and so easy and so uncreative that you've already failed with your very premise about what the future's like. And you know what? I don't even have to go any further than that, because already you have ruined Star Trek. Ruined it by your dumb premise of 1,000 years in the future. What you should have done, what I would have done, is I would have gone and found a think tank of futurists, and I would have said, where do you think humanity's actually... Let's take the Star Trek universe. We're all familiar with it. 23rd century. You're going 1,000 years. You're going to go to the 32nd century. Where do you think human beings would be in 1,000 years? Transhumanism? People could change their genders. People could do whatever. The humanity that they should have found in the future should have been so far removed from what we know as to have been... Everything would have been alien. And what do you do when you have become the aliens in a civilization, in a future civilization? That's science fiction. Then it becomes interesting. But these writers wrote, and then all the other crap, the burn, it's just it's all gobbledygook. After your stupid, unimaginative future that you're going to portray, which it's so sad. Because if you were to sit down, here's a thought exercise. So you could sit down and ask your crack writing team that came from Vampire Diaries or wherever the hell they came from, Gilmore Girls, whatever, One Tree Hill, your crack sci-fi team that you've put together to write what the humanity, what the galaxy is going to look like 1,000 years from now. Because boy, you really have a crack team to help you out there, huh? So, all right, so you've got this team of brilliant writers who are amazing futurists who are well-versed in, the great science fiction literature of the past 100 years. You've got that writing staff at your disposal. So then you go around you're like, okay, where is humanity in 1,000 years? Now let's play this game, people out there. I'm asking you right now. Let's assume, because we're Star Trek fans, that we have a positive view of the future. We're not going to blow ourselves up. Where is humanity going to be in 1,000 years? Let's start by extrapolating on biotechnology. Where do you think biotechnology might lead mankind in 1,000 years? Now, keep in mind, probably the singularity has happened. AI has become sentient. And we now there's computations that and ways of looking at the universe that we never had before. How would that affect us? What if aging could be rolled back? In 1,000 years, will we all be immortal? Perhaps. If we're immortal, how would that change our society? What would that do to people? And if you could be immortal, and you also had the kind of medical technology, what if you could change gender at will? If you wanted to be a man, a woman, you wanted to be however you wanted to be, the surgical technology, the medical technology, 1,000 years from now, you could literally change your gender at will. So you might, because we're now immortal, you might spend a couple of 100 years as a dude, and then you decide you want to be a woman. You could do it. Because now that medical technology exists. Now, how would that change human civilization? How would that change gender roles? Would gender roles even matter? I don't know. These are just spitballing ideas. I've just been saying this for the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes. We have remember, the Star Trek Discovery writing team is one of the crack group of science fiction minds that has ever worked on a television show ever. So you would think, let's just spend one afternoon on the big board extrapolating, or even maybe getting in a futurist or two and interviewing them. Where's humanity going to be in 1,000 years? Assuming we don't destroy ourselves. What if we had? What if we could travel to other star systems? What would that mean? How would everything change? What, and then you've got the Star Trek universe itself. You've already got the universe. It's already been built for you. Let's extrapolate upon that. What happens if unification between the Romulans and the Vulcans occur? Does it have to be because, oh wait, let's blow shit up. The Hobus Star goes nova. Romulan homeworld's destroyed. Oh, yada, yada, yada. I mean, see what I'm saying? I think you get my point. Modern Star Trek is terrible because it does not do the fundamental thing that Star Trek ultimately has to do to be Star Trek. And that is, the future is a positive one. It is a positive future that could show us wondrous things, but we do not live in a fucking dystopia. And if that's where you're going to take Star Trek, you fucking failed. Because the very essence of Star Trek, and then people are, well, but Rob, it's these people are bringing hope to the dystopian future. No. No, 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 no. Again, this is my opinion. Your mileage may vary. But the whole point of Star Trek, and by the way, Star Trek is elitist. You have the best of the best. You don't have a ship full of people that are damaged, that are problematic, because that is, again, a failure of imagination. It's really easy to write people like, oh, I just had a problem with my parents and I had learning disabilities and I'm on the spectrum and all that shit. Fuck all that. That's not what the future is going to be about. That's not what Star Trek is all about. That's what the aliens are all about. We're not. We're squared away. That's the whole point. Humanity is squared away, and we go out to explore strange new worlds. And it's the strange new worlds that get to reflect back to us. That's where you find the society of people on the spectrum and how do they function. It's not our core crew. But anyway, what do I know? Nobody cares what I have to say or think about Star Trek. But anyway, Undead Sick, I want to thank you. I feel better. Thank you today for giving me a little bit of time to rant about modern Star Trek and why I fucking hate it so much and why I think it is the most creatively bankrupt use of a franchise, well, since maybe ever. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's see. This next one comes from Jamie Wright. Jamie Wright says, "Hi, Rob. I miss movie theaters as much as you. When you said that you get really angry at people on their phones in the cinema, you reminded me of when I went to watch Avengers Infinity War with 4 of my friends. However, one of those friends doesn't care about films, and he just wanted to come because he didn't want to feel left out. FOMO is a tough thing. About 10 minutes into the film, he just grabbed his phone and started playing games. What? Well, that really pissed me off. We told him to turn it off, and he said, no, the film's boring, so he carried on playing. The man behind him even asked him to turn it off, and he told him to fuck off. This caused the man to go outside and complain, causing my friend to get kicked out. Rightfully so, by the way. Your friend's an asshole. And you should teach him manners. As he was standing up, he asked us why we weren't standing up. I told him that we're not going to leave because we haven't been kicked out. This caused him to get really angry, and he blocked me and the other friends on all social media and hasn't spoken to us since. And to be honest, I don't mind. Jamie, you're a better man. Wait, you say Jamie. I just assume Jamie, right? You could be a girl. You could be a boy. You could be. You could have different pronouns. I don't know. I don't want to offend you in any way, shape, or form. I just want to say it doesn't matter. You were right. Your friend was wrong. He's an asshole. And by the way, his parents should be embarrassed. And everybody he knows should be embarrassed because he was being rude and then he doubled down on it. So you're better off. And so is the world at large because you're not taking him to the movies anymore. I mean, I do not understand. Here's the thing. Here's a lesson. Here's a pro tip for everybody out there. When you walk outside the door of your house or your apartment or wherever you live, your car, wherever you happen to be living, when you walk outside the door to your house, Do not expect the world to be the way you want it. The world is the world. You need to expect that when you go out into the world is going to be the way it is, not necessarily the way you want it to be. The world is not your oyster. The world is not yours. You have to remember that the world is full of everybody else that's in it. And you should have the attitude that when you go out into the world, certainly bring your own unique self out there. Bring yourself out to the world, but don't expect it to be the way you want it to be. You should learn to experience and accept the world the way it is. That's what makes life interesting. I mean, if you expect the world, why do you think there's so many Karens? You know what Karens don't want? They don't want the world to be the world. They want the world to be the world they want it to be. And that's why they Karen out. They Karen out because they expect that they're owed something, that the planet Earth should be exactly the way they want. When you leave your house, you should have the attitude that the world's exciting. It's an exciting, interesting, crazy place, and I don't know what's going to happen. Every time you step out your front door, it should be an adventure, and you should grab that adventure, take it by the collar, and be like, you know what? I can't wait to see what's out there. And when something is not exactly the way you want it to be out there in that big bad world, you should stop and go, and learn, adapt. See where this leads you. Maybe you'll learn something. Because the world is never going to be the way you want it to be, ever, ever, ever. So when you walk into someone else's store, or you go to someone else's house, or you wherever it is you go, it's never going to be the way you want it to be because it's not yours. And if you go out in the world and have that attitude, it'll be a much better place. So if you're bored and you're sitting in a room full of hundreds of other people who are there to do one thing, which is watch a movie, if you decide to go onto your phone, you should excuse yourself and leave. Why should all of those other people in that room be subjected to you and whatever it is you want the world to be? Whatever, I'm bored, so I'm going to ruin it for the 400 or 500 people that are in this room so I can play my games on my phone. You know what? Fuck you. You're the problem. You're the problem. Fix the problem. And and the fact that you don't already know that is that's a double problem or a triple problem. Be better. When you go out into the world, respect the world. It'll respect you back. It will. Anyway, great letter. Thank you for writing it, Jamie. I appreciate it. Let's see. James Wallace writes in. James Wallace says, "Hi, Rob. I wanted to touch on a couple of topics in this letter. To begin, I wanted to start off with the Variety review you covered the other day concerning Carey Mulligan's looks, or the subject of her looks in Promising Young Woman. Now, hear me out. This could be controversial to address, but I'm going to address it and risk ire nonetheless." Ooh. With some degree, I can kind of understand where the reviewer is coming from. Personally, I don't like it when looks are discussed, but it is a topic of conversation for a lot of people. Sometimes both genders are ruthless when it comes to this topic. Well, I think in this case, the looks are important because they directly affect the plot of the film. From my perspective, Carey Mulligan is a beautiful woman. However, I can still see what the reviewer was saying from my perspective. I thought she looked older than the role seemed to require, especially when standing next to the guy that was her former classmate. Yet, at the same time, I felt it was justified due to her character was traumatized, and that can affect people in different ways. Stress affects looks. I could also see that the guys she was taking home weren't thinking, why would she go home with me? Plus, those guys really weren't what one would call studs. They were all kind of in the geeky category. Just my perspective, but it did cross my mind while watching the film. Having said that, I think it's a huge slippery slope when a publication that publishes said review doesn't protect their employee. By publishing the review itself, they're saying, we approve of this work. 100%, absolutely. For Carey Mulligan to jump in there shows maybe a bit of privilege on her part. Absolutely. People hear negative comments all the time at the workplace. And you know, actresses, of course, are known for how insightful and stable and zen they are about criticism. Yes, people's looks are discussed in the workplace. If people knew how headshots of actors were discussed in an office in Hollywood, they would be shocked. Yes, they would. Also in public, I've had people comment on my hairstyle more than I care for, but oh well, come on, man, you look great. I've seen your hair. Miss Mulligan is showing she has thin skin to just not let the comment go. It's an opinion by a reviewer who will not be as famous or have the wealth she has. She's brought attention to the review that wouldn't have been there unless she said something. Even as I say she's thin-skinned, I get her point. But still, choose your battles, because to me she looks pretty and privileged, and to wield her power upon because she looks petty and privileged to wield her power upon a publication. What's next? Every time a director or actor doesn't like a comment in a review about their work, the publication will apologize? If a comment is made in a film about a character's looks, the studio will apologize? It's a slippery slope. Having said that, I loved Promising Young Woman. My opinion of the film hasn't diminished, but my opinion of Miss Mulligan kind of has. Even though I've heard she's a really nice person. I watched a screener DVD of the film last Friday along with screener DVDs of Malcolm and Marie and News of the World. One film was brilliant. Loved the ending. I'm talking about Promising Young Woman. One was good and the ending was heartwarming despite my issues with Tom Hanks' accent. And one, I just couldn't understand why Netflix paid $30 million for the film, when if you want to watch a couple argue for 90 minutes, I'll go to a friend's house. If anything as good has come out of this pandemic, it's that films are almost on a level playing field. Independent films and blockbuster studio films are almost making the same money in their theatrical release or receiving the same attention on streamers or VOD. News of the World cost $38 million to make, and it's made $10 million in domestic theaters, and Netflix bought the international rights, and if they spent $30 million on Malcolm and Marie, which cost $2.5 million to make, a huge miscalculation in my opinion, I'm sure they spent a little more than that for News of the World. That film probably has made its money back, and it's not some blockbuster type of film, but the film is doing well with VOD along with some other films that aren't huge releases. Promising Young Woman has made nearly $5 million in theaters. 2 films, one with a star and one with a good actress, yet only separated by a few million at the box office. Wonder Woman 1984 is at $40 million, and it's been out for nearly 3 months. $40 million. Tenet made $57 million domestic and $363 million worldwide in theaters, yet that was considered a disappointment. Yet Wonder Woman 84 is considered a hit with $154 million worldwide. Plus, we're not taking into account how much it cost to make Wonder Woman 84 and the $20 million spent to appease Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins. Did HBO Max triple their subscription base? No, it doubled. Wonder Woman 1984 received 14.5 million views in its first 48 hours. Now, just for comparison, in 2018, The Christmas Chronicles received 20 million views on Netflix in its first week, which represents $200 million if it were ticket sales. Say Wonder Woman 1984 got 20 million views in its first week, plus the box office, then that's $354 million. Yet Wonder Woman just a few years ago made $822 million worldwide, and Warner Brothers is fast-tracking the third film? We're talking about a $468 million difference. And I've read $200 million was spent on the film, not counting P&A, which is prints and advertising, plus the debt while withholding the release for almost a year. Pretty sure the same amount of money spent on Wonder Woman 1984 wasn't spent on Christmas Chronicles. Plus, Christmas Chronicles Part 2 is doing pretty well for the streamer. In essence, Wonder Woman 1984 is a flop, and yet a third film is fast-tracked. We'll see how that film turns out in a couple of years. There's a reason why Tenet isn't on HBO Max yet. It's because it's doing well in VOD, either topping 2 charts or just being in another chart in the top 10. Plus, Tenet was the top-selling Blu-ray for 5 weeks. Shouldn't that point to the film being a success? HBO Max could have it on their streamer now, but they're holding back. Does this show that they lack confidence in their own streaming service? Promising Young Woman is now on VOD, and word of mouth and awards talk might make the film a huge success. Pretty sure it was a tier 1 budgeted film, judging from the production values, which brings me to my point. The playing field for independent films and films that millions of dollars were spent on are almost the same. Not there yet, but if things continue the way they are with theaters, it will be the same. Star power holds some value, but it's usually the concept of the narrative that brings people to view the film. Perhaps we'll see in June when Top Gun Maverick is released in theaters. Hopefully by then things are closer to normal. We'll just have to wait and see. If Top Gun Maverick is making Wonder Woman 1984 numbers in June, blockbuster or studio films we're used to seeing will be scarce due to studios won't want to spend the type of money they've been spending in the past 10 years. They'll greenlight more independent films, which I think will be a good thing. And in this letter, James puts in a number of links. He actually added, I love this, he added footnotes and where his research came from. So I'm going to put those in the live chat right now. I'll put all of them. And I want to thank you, James. What a great letter. Yeah, I think you're right. What's really interesting right now is here's what people are not talking about. And James touched on this. Is that when you are watching movies now on streaming services, and I've often said this myself, and that is, when you're watching, let's just say all movies are 2 hours. They're not, but let's just say if they are this argument, they are. When you sit down and watch a movie, you're not thinking to yourself, oh, I'm watching this blockbuster film. I'm watching this movie that costs $200 million. When you sit down to watch a movie, for the most part, I know there's going to be contrarians who say, well, I do, Rob. But for the most part, most people aren't thinking to themselves, here, I keep putting these down, how much the movie costs when they're watching it. All they're thinking is, am I entertained by this? Is this a good movie? And as we all know, we've seen good movies that cost $1 million. We've seen good movies that cost $10 million. We've seen good movies that cost $100 million. Now, the thing is, you couldn't make a movie like Infinity War or Endgame and make it cost $50 million. You're looking at a movie that by definition is going to cost, well, I think Endgame, they said it cost $350 million. And you can see it. I find Infinity War and Endgame together wildly entertaining and a 1-2 punch of wonderful imaginary cinema. But they can't be made for cheap. Now, the thing is Infinity War and Endgame, almost 6 hours of running time, is that more entertaining in the same amount of time as, say, The Queen's Gambit? Queen's Gambit might be a little longer, but do you get the same entertainment value? And I think the question is, or the answer is, yes. So what streaming has done is it's really, in a way, shown that it's not so much about budget as it is about time and entertainment value. The studios like making movies like Endgame or Infinity War or any tentpole property because what it does is it takes $200 million and translates it into $1 billion at the box office. Or in the case of Endgame, $3 billion. That's huge money. Most movies have not a hope in the world to make that kind of money. Now, if you think about it, I started out this stream talking about Hunt for Red October, which in 1990 cost, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 to $65 million, based on a big literary property. And at the time, Hunt for Red October was a big hit for what it was. As a matter of fact, let's find out just how big of a hit it was. Let's use the newfangled internet and see exactly how much Hunt for Red October made. I love the internet because we can find these things out live on camera. So, 1990, Hunt for Red October had, wow, I was wrong. According to Box Office Mojo, Hunt for Red October had a $30 million budget. Now, 31 years ago, I guess that was, I thought it was like 65 million. But according to this, let's just go with this. Assume they know. $30 million budget for Hunt for Red October. You could never make that movie for $30 million today. Its domestic opening, it made domestically $122,012,643. It made 61% of its budget domestically. International, it made $78,500,000 for a worldwide cum of $200,512,643 on a $30 million budget. Now, it used to be that a movie had to gross 3 times its budget to break even. Now we make it 4 times because of P&A, prints and advertising, marketing. So let's just go 4 times its budget. So 4 times its budget, $120 million. So this movie made a total of $200 million. So that's pretty damn good. Now, of course, the studio doesn't get to take home that $80 million. You know, it has to split. So maybe the studio, including let's just be conservative. Let's say that the studio, I don't know, let's say they took home $20 million on this movie. That was the profit. $20 million. $30 million spend. When all is said and done, they make $20 million in profit. That's pretty good. You know, my rule of thumb when I'm talking about independent movies is when I deal with an investor, you want to give them 30% back on their money. Well, $20 million on a $30 million spend is about, what is that, 66 something percent. That's pretty damn good. That's a great return. That's a healthy business model, and Paramount was very healthy back in the day. Back in 1990, I mean, Paramount was like that studio that was on top. Those kinds of margins are huge, and that was really good. That was good. That was when Hollywood business worked. Well, nowadays the studios don't make movies like that anymore. Nowadays, you have to make a movie that costs $200 million, and you're hoping it's going to gross $1 billion. But if you think about it, if you're making a $200 million movie and let's say it has to gross 4 times its budget just to break even, you're at $800 million and then there's $200 million left. So how can you possibly take home that 66% margin? And again, I know this is not, if you were to pull out the calculator and go, well, Rob, and your numbers aren't really, that's not what it is. Yes, you're right. It's not. But the point I was trying to make is that the entire business of Hollywood, the studios now are just making tentpole properties and bread and butter movies that would pull in a 65% or 66% profit on the spend. That doesn't even exist anymore. And that's one of the problems with Hollywood. But when it comes right down to it, the real problem is, and in the world of streaming, everything is equalized because you're looking at the movie. I mean, you're looking at it on the same screen. It doesn't matter whether you're watching an episode or a rerun of Taxi or Cheers, or you're watching The Queen's Gambit, or you're watching The Boys, or you're watching Wonder Woman 84 for its $200 million spend. You're watching it all in the same box. And all that matters is in the 2 hours you spend watching, were you entertained? Nobody cares how much things cost. The studios do. But like James was saying in his letter, it is the great equalizer. I think streaming is the great equalizer because indie cinema is just as important as Wonder Woman 84. When you're watching things back to back, if you watch Promising Young Woman and Wonder Woman 84, which movie? Try this. I guess Wonder Woman 84 is not streaming anymore. But when it does happen and Promising Young Woman's on a streaming service, watch Wonder Woman 84 and watch Promising Young Woman and ask yourself, which movie was entertaining to you? Which movie were you more entertained by? I don't mean your family, but you personally. I'll bet you the answer is Promising Young Woman. Might not be, but I bet it is. And then you think to yourself, well, what movie should have been made? And there's existential questions that I think the streaming wars are bringing up, and James brought this up. And I think you're right. I mean, on another note, you brought up a lot of stuff, but back to the Carey Mulligan situation. Look, no actress wants to be called out or be called anything. The insinuation is that the movie didn't somehow work because she wasn't hot enough. But my insinuation is, have you ever been to a bar? Have you ever been to a bar when it's Saturday night and you're partying and everybody's having a good time? I mean, it's not like you're walking in to say, I don't know, Bulgari or Tiffany or something to buy somebody a diamond. You know, you're in a bar having fun on a Saturday night, and you know, the opportunities that present themselves, depending on what it is you're looking for, you know, usually you're not going to sit around and wait for, I don't know, your A-plus dream girl. You're going to meet a nice girl and who likes to party. So the idea that she's supposed to look like Margot Robbie has no bearing on real life at all, which is weird. And I think Carey Mulligan, anybody, I mean, yeah, she might not be your taste. You might like more olive skin girls, or you might like girls that are a little bit more, have more meat on their bones. But if you're a dude, I mean, Carey Mulligan, it doesn't matter who you are. That's a nice girl to meet on a Friday or Saturday night. And so I think it works out whether she looks older or not. She could very well be older. So, but anyway, yeah, I think your main point of the article about streaming is, you know, well taken, or the point is well made. So thanks for that, James. I appreciate it. I think that's the thing. Streaming is the great equalizer in terms of money versus entertainment value. And yeah, this one comes from Eduardo Cruz. Eduardo Cruz. Hello, Eduardo. Fantasy Imagination Connoisseurs short shrift. Let's see. Uh-oh. Hi, Rob. I'm typing this letter to you while you were talking about a D&D movie when you seemed to give short shrift to the source material for a D&D movie. While you said that there was no material other than modules or that D&D was generic for the basis of a movie, you sounded like Kathleen Kennedy about there was no source material for the sequel trilogy when she asked about the making of that trilogy. I love it when you talk about being imagination connoisseurs, but it seems that it is one-sided towards sci-fi, which I don't mind since that is predominant viewing we have in movies and TV. Wait until an announcement on the 16th. I grew up viewing Star Trek and Star Wars, but I also grew up playing D&D in high school in the 80s. But once I went to college, I expanded to anime, comic books, and novels since I was finally able to buy them. Though I love Star Trek and Star Wars, I'm drawn mostly toward fantasy novels to read. I just couldn't get into reading Star Wars and Trek novels, but got drawn to fantasy novels like the Wheel of Time series. You know what? I've never heard of the Wheel of Time series. I wonder if one of the Imagination Connoisseurs here at the Burnettwork has ever heard of that series. Sorry if I'm rambling, but the point is that there are over 30 years of D&D novels for a movie to be based on that are just over 30 years, just like that, just that there are over 30 years, you missed a word here, just that there are over 30 years of novels for a Star Wars or Star Trek movie. The Icewind Dale trilogy, or the original Dragonlance series, if properly executed, can be just as epic as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Those D&D novels under the old TSR brand range from Forgotten Realms to Dark Sun to Ravenloft, from fantasy to horror. Rob, just remember that Imagination Connoisseurs aren't confined to sci-fi, but to fantasy and more. Plus, I agree that the people that brought the previous D&D movies to the movie screens did not know or understand their source material. Laugh out loud. Thanks for listening and reading this letter. Sincerely, Eduardo Cruz. Eduardo, you bring up a good point. But I would say this. Those novels, I don't know the rights. I have no idea about the rights of those novels. But those rights are in addition to the rights to D&D. And I would imagine that whatever the rights agreement is, however, whoever made a deal, I think, was it Tom DeSanto? I'm not sure. But whoever has the rights to D&D, the rights to those novels are probably some kind of sub-rights or different kinds of rights. I'm willing to bet that those novels that were published by TSR, that's a sub-license. Those people were actually writing their own fantasy novels, and they used D&D, or they were published by TSR or whatever as their own books. So those would probably be a separate rights deal. And I agree with you. You know, if somebody wanted to know, well, we're going to make a D&D movie, my development staff would then go look into the novels that D&D published, and especially trilogies and things that we could develop, and call them the D&D movie. But it really would depend on the rights agreement. Like, for instance, CBS owns Lock, Stock, and Barrel, all the novels that are published under the Star Trek banner, and most of those novels, unless it's like Peter David creating his own characters and things, most of the Star Trek characters and novels are based on previously existing characters that appear in the Star Trek shows. So they're already characters, and there's already backstory and stories to be mined. Whereas the D&D stories, they've got, okay, Dungeons & Dragons, which is this generic fantasy realm, but there's a million different stories you can tell. Then authors come in and they write their own fantasy worlds. I don't know if they're creator-owned or not, but then they get published under the D&D banner, so everybody comes out right. So I think you're correct, but what you're saying is that, yeah, there's D&D, but D&D is just a role-playing game. And it doesn't come with established characters or other than your generic medieval monster fantasy characters. And the books that were published, that's probably a sub-license. So, I mean, that's a great basis if you found you pick your favorite novels, but then they might not necessarily even be D&D novels. They might be generic fantasy novels, in which case it wouldn't be necessarily a D&D movie, because you'd want, in order to get the rights to D&D, you have to buy those rights. The rights for the books or the stories is either a sub-license or something else. I don't know. Unless maybe D&D does own all the rights to those books and those characters outright. Although, again, I don't know. That would be interesting. But it goes back, again, to the top of the hour, chain of title. But yeah, we shall see. But a great letter, though. Thank you for sending that in. Now, that's something else. I'll read that. I'll read that letter. Josh writes in, "Greetings, Rob. I hope this letter finds you well. I'm responding to your deep longing for the movie theater experience voiced in Robservations 617. As someone who only watches 3 to 5 movies per year, yet watches your show on a regular basis, I feel compelled to share my predictions about the future of cinema, despite my general disinterest in the medium. To clarify, I've enjoyed many movies over the years, Sam Mendes' 1917 being the most recent example. I have it on Blu-ray right over there. And once upon a time was excited by the cinema-going experience. Yet nowadays, I'm much more drawn to podcasts, audiobooks, video games, and YouTube. This shift in me started at the birth of the MCU. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, but with the MCU's success, all the major studios shifted to big tentpole franchises, appealing to the lowest common denominator. Well, let me stop you there. I would say you're correct. Your assessment is correct. But I would not say that the MCU appeals to the lowest common denominator. I don't think that's true. I think that by definition, the MCU does requires someone to be an imagination connoisseur. You have to buy into that universe, and they certainly are not aimed at the lowest common denominator. There's a lot of Civil War, Winter Soldier. There's a lot of really compelling ideas in those movies, I think, that appeal to the thoughtful imagination connoisseur. But anyway, let me continue. As a consequence, I found a significant dip in the quality of screenwriting with an over-reliance on CGI. It was at this time other mediums started to gain popularity, and I find infinitely more value and depth in, say, Jordan Peterson's biblical series on YouTube. I've watched some of that, and it's fascinating. Then some shallow 3-hour modern myth formulated by corporate committee. Oh, come on now. You know what? I'm going to put a hex on you. It's coming. All that said, I can't deny that movie theaters are like modern-day cathedrals and create a reverential experience which elevates the enjoyment of whatever's on screen. Since movies are now one of my least favorite forms of entertainment, I need the immersion and elevation of cinema to draw me in. Enter virtual reality. From the first day I strapped on a VR headset, I knew I was gazing into the future. I know, I agree with you. Everything in the virtual world seems so present and real. An alternate universe I didn't want to leave. Oh, but we've seen many cautionary tales about where that leads. Fast forward 2 years and I spend nearly every day in VR. It's now an integral part of my healthy lifestyle, as I can get daily cardio workouts in the comfort of my living room while winter and COVID keep me indoors. Recently, I've started to get back into movies and TV shows thanks to virtual cinemas. I can watch any streaming platform in a giant IMAX theater or play a 3D movie in true stereoscopic from my local Plex server. You're not incorrect. Right now, for a few $100s, anyone can pick up a VR headset and a pair of quality headphones and reclaim the cinema experience without the traditional drawbacks like expensive concessions, noisy strangers, or having to hire a babysitter. Indeed, one can enjoy an epic cinema experience while their significant other sleeps soundly next to them in bed. I know. In VR, you're not only relegated to an audience of one. Some apps allow you to watch movies and TV shows with family and friends or total strangers. A recent fond memory is spending the evening with a professional drummer in a public theater where he streamed concert videos to the audience and answered our questions about the music business. I feel like traditional cinemas were already on their way out, but the pandemic has accelerated the process. Like vinyl, there will be purists that swear by the experience, but to stay alive, physical theaters will need to offer something virtual theaters can't. D-Box and 4DX technologies help, but that's not enough. Throw in the mix of augmented reality where Facebook and Apple are in a race to make AR glasses as ubiquitous as today's smartphones, and within 10 years, physical theaters will have to compete with not only what I described above, but also movies that put you and your home at the center of the action with holographic projection. There's a lot more that can be said here. For instance, the technical hurdles you'll face with some of these experiences, the requirement to link your Facebook account if you opt for an Oculus Quest headset, etc. Yet most friction points will be ironed out in time as XR, VR, AR, XR meaning virtual reality and augmented reality, become mainstream and more competitors enter the market. I'm curious to know, Rob, are you hopeful for what opportunities AR and VR may provide cinemaphiles and independent creators in the future? Or are the best days of film clearly behind us and we should look to the past, not the future, for our cinema fix? P.S. I'm sure my opinions won't hold much weight with your audience, especially after they learn, I believe, 2003 to 2013 was the second most innovative era for rock music, the first being 63 to 1973. You'd only come to this conclusion if you spent countless hours on indie rock blogs in the aughts or have terrible taste in music. Thanks for the great videos, Rob. Keep it up, Josh. Josh is absolutely correct. So for those of you who might not know, you can strap a VR headset on and you can watch a movie in your VR glasses, and it can recreate the experience of watching something in IMAX for you. Yes, it can duplicate what it's like to look at an IMAX movie. It's just you're just wearing VR glasses. And I think obviously the future is all about VR and augmented reality. I do believe that. The difference is, and like you said, yes, you can now go into events. You can go into an event space and sit down in a virtual theater in even a different country with a bunch of people. Of course, they still have to have avatars and all of that. All of that's coming down the pike, and some of it's already here. And I agree with you. I think ultimately the movie-going experience, because people are like, well, there's this idea, well, people want to go places with other people. Yes, they do. But the thing is, and look, nothing is going to be able to. When I go into the Chinese theater and watch something in their laser projection IMAX, I can feel the bass, the bass. I can feel it. It's bone rattling, and when you're sitting next to people, you can feel their presence next to you, and that's something that VR has a long way to go before it's going to be able to reproduce that. But you're right, man. VR technology is going to get to the point where you'll be able to watch something. It'll be almost, aside from the fact you'll always know you're wearing headsets or however it's going to work. Eventually you won't. Eventually they'll have that holodeck technology, but you're right. And what you're describing is the norm 10 years from now. Maybe it'll be here sooner, but you're absolutely describing where we are all going. Whether it's VR or AR or XR, a combination of the two, you're absolutely correct. I mean, imagine you'll have performance venues around the planet where, let's say you want, like I've always wanted to see Juno Reactor. When I was in Bulgaria making Hills Run Red, Juno Reactor was playing in Kiev, which is a hop, skip, and a jump by plane. I almost flew to go see Juno Reactor. I would kill to see a Juno Reactor show. Juno Reactor is it's Goa trance band. You've heard their music in the Matrix movies, but just look up any Juno Reactor live performance and you'll see why I would love to go. Now, you will be through VR. Let's say they're in a studio or they're in a live performance venue that's completely tricked out to provide VR, streaming VR anywhere in the world. You could log in and I could pay my $25 and you could be anywhere on the planet and watch a live Juno Reactor show. As a matter of fact, you could watch any rock band anywhere in the world. You could watch, if you wanted to follow, like my friend Horace Austin. Horace follows The Who around. Well, now you'd be able to imagine being able to follow your favorite band around, and part of their stage show is they would have VR things, and they'd be streaming the entire experience. You could even pick you could have limitless. You could pick your seats. You literally could sit wherever you want because it's virtual, and they would just make sure that they might have 10 or 20 or 50 people sitting in the same virtual seat, but you'd be able to watch that concert. I mean, there's a lot of technology that has to be worked out, but you could do that, and that's going to be the future. And I think this pandemic, in a way, like if I was a real cynic or a real conspiracy theorist, I would say that this pandemic was pushed on us to make the future that's inevitable start to be sort of supercharged, get here a lot faster than it was supposed to get here. But I don't believe that, and I don't believe in anyone's ability to engineer something like that. But the future is coming faster. But everything you said in this is true. You can recreate going to the cinema to a certain extent, because I still can't feel the bass. And you're right, but I could sit and watch an IMAX movie as my significant other slumbers soundly next door, although I would have my headphones up loud enough that she'd probably still be bothered by how loud I was listening to something. But you're absolutely right. And this is all something to take into consideration. I mean, why not? I mean, I'll tell you something. If I could watch a VR headset and watch, say, The Queen's Gambit, but make it appears to me, to my senses, that I'm watching it on a giant movie screen, I would absolutely rather watch movies that way. 100%. And by the way, it's coming if it's not already here. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we have, again, if I was a Star Trek writer, I would say, hey, where are we going to be as far as VR goes, and how is that going to affect us? That's a good Star Trek story, even though it leads to the holodeck, but still. A great letter, Josh, and I agree with you. And the fact is, what you're looking for is I watch a lot more YouTube than I used to. I barely watch television at all. I watch way more things on YouTube. And like I said, I like watching long-form conversations with people, and I like to be enriched by being exposed to different ideas and things I might not know, and I learn about them by listening to people talk for long periods of time. And I'll watch anybody. I'll watch all kinds of different pundits, people on all sides of the aisle. I don't just watch. I watch everybody. If they're covering a topic, whether it's from a conservative standpoint, a liberal standpoint, whatever, if the topic is interesting to me, I don't care who's covering it. I'll listen to it or watch it to see what I can glean from it. And imagine when we have more and more and more of that in real time around the world. It's going to be pretty dope. I'm pretty stoked about all that, to be honest. Let's see what you guys are saying. I know a lot of people are sending in things here, and let's see what you guys are saying, because I know that there's a lot of it. I'm going to go back there was some people that sent in some tips that I read on the last stream that might not necessarily have been meant to be read here. And I'm going to go back and let's see where we are here. I'm going to go back and look at what you guys are saying. The first person is, of course, Brendan Sheehy says, Rob, Leon the Professional is one of my favorite films with its pulpy 90s action mixed with whimsical French magic. I also consider Natalie Portman's performance to be the best on-screen child acting. I'm surprised they never made a sequel with an adult Portman. I'm surprised they've talked about it. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. There's always, you know how, well, is it here? Can I, you know how I always just pull weird random shit out on from the Robservatory? Here is my Matilda. Actually, I should probably, I'll change this. I'll go to a different camera. I have a beautiful Leon figure, and then I have, this isn't so beautiful, but it is a Matilda action figure that goes with Leon. And, yeah. So I do have a Matilda figure that I was going to, I'll put her here. So it's just funny that you asked about that, and I just happen to be moving around my Matilda figure. But there you go. So, Brandon, there you go. I love that movie. I think it's great. I quite enjoy it. Let's see. Is there anybody I missed? Nope, these are all. So, okay, we're good. I think that was the only one that I was missing to read on the show. Jay Henson sends in a tip. Thank you, Jay Henson. Insamatic says, in a cheeky mood, having a few beers. Cheer, fine, sir. Cheers. Well, cheers to you, Insamatic. It's a Whining About Movies day. We are going to be doing Whining About Movies tonight at 7:30. Wow, it's a little over 2 hours from now. We were talking about Gladiator. Are you not entertained? Justin Toner. I love the fact that Justin, my moderator, sends me super chats. Rob, did you pick up the package from Dieter yet that has the copies of African Kung Fu Nazis? I hope it won't be sent back. It will not be sent back. I will pick it up. I keep forgetting to pick it up. I'm going to pick it up. We'll probably go tomorrow and pick it up. Hitchcock is the GOAT sends in a tip. Actually, one of two. Says, with all the emphasis for these streaming platforms to create their own IP universes, what are the chances that Michael B. Jordan's John Clark character in Without Remorse could interact and overlap with John Krasinski's Jack Ryan, since both are Amazon shows now? Ooh, that's a good idea. The possibilities could be endless, from original story ideas and also books that have never been done that include both characters, Debt of Honor, etc. I don't know if they could do Debt of Honor. For those of you who don't know, Tom Clancy's Debt of Honor ends with Japanese terrorists crashing an airliner into Congress, into the Capitol, when the president is addressing the Congress, and everybody dies except the designated survivor, Jack Ryan, which they actually kind of did in Designated Survivor. I'm also a huge Clancy fan. I was disappointed the films fluttered out. Me too, man. I really wanted to see. Well, I wanted to see Debt of Honor and Executive Orders because I wanted to see Jack Ryan become president of the United States, even though we saw that in Air Force One, which is kind of like an unofficial Tom Clancy movie. But yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It could happen. I would love to see that. I would love to see John Clark and Jack Ryan team up again and do a movie. I thought it was great. I love Willem Dafoe as Clark in Clear and Present Danger. I love Clear and Present Danger. Love it. And I would love to see John Clark come back. I'd love to see Michael B. Jordan and John Krasinski team up to go kick ass. That'd be great. Justin Jorgensen sends in a tip and says, I See Dead People. One of the greatest films I've ever seen, and one I only watched for the first time last year. I would assume you're talking about The Sixth Sense. My jaw dropped at that twist ending and almost made me cry because it was such a shock and everything I thought I knew was a lie. Wow. Well, maybe the movie was I mean, I'm just assuming that The Sixth Sense is what you're talking about. Maybe there's another movie called I See Dead People that had the same kind of shocking twist ending. But you know what? I got to tell you, when I saw The Sixth Sense for the first time, I didn't know. I think I went opening night, didn't know much about it, and I was blown away. I thought it was great. It sucked me in because I believe in what I'm seeing. I don't sit in movies trying to second guess things unless they're like mysteries or something, or at least I figured out what's going on. It's popped into my head, and I have to But I thought Sixth Sense, I was totally following along, and it got me. I loved it. Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Yerke. I think the Claude and Candida and the Yerkes, man, the Yerkes, I want to party with them. The most romantic couple ever. What are you guys doing for Valentine's Day? Hi, Rob. Did you see my main man, Ronald D. Moore, inked a deal this summer with Disney Plus? Yes. Glad to see him finally making the big cheddar. I reckon this means he ain't ever coming back to Trek. Oh, well. I wish him well. Live long and prosper, the Yerk man. That is true. Ronald D. Moore, getting his big start in Star Trek The Next Generation. He created Outlander. He, of course, did Battlestar Galactica. And he, of course, is doing For All Mankind for Apple. Apparently, Apple did not back up the Brinks truck to him the way Disney did. Maybe Ronald Moore had an idea that he took to Disney, and Disney said, oh, we're going to lock you up and keep you with us, which is pretty cool. Look at all these members here. Larry Holt, Twirly Wolf, Jack, Jason Webster, You Know the Hero, Brian Sutter. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, Jack Ryan films are some of my favorites. Thank you for the recommendation on Red October 4K. Dude, so good. Now do Clear and Present Danger with an isolated Horner score. I love Clear and Present Danger. I love it. I think it's great. I'm glad you liked it. And 200 Watt Studio goes on to say, in 200 years, we went from horses to steam engines to combustion engines to electric cars. We have prototype cars that fly. In 800 years, 900 years. What the fuck, Kurtzman? I know. Failure of imagination to the nth degree. Super Surreal sends in a nice super chat. Thank you, Super Surreal. Rob, I just click in. I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't care. All I want to know is where the hell are the Robservatory hoodies? I know they exist. I need it right now. Love you, brother. Well, Super Surreal, you want to... By the way, those Robservatory hoodies are dope. They're great hoodies. If I will let me... allow me. What is it? Let's see. It's T... Yeah, they're Teespring. You want a Robservatory hoodie? There's actually two different designs. And I will oh, palm trees. Come on, man. Okay. Palm trees are there. Man, I really hate when you have to do verification with pictures and there's like some little picture that's so dumb. But okay, you want to know there's two different Robservatory hoodies, and I have to say that they were both designed by Bill Hunt of the Digital Bits. And go to my stores and I will find where they are as it's loading. It's taking me a while to load these things. And I'm looking for the featured products. Okay. I'm going to put one in. So can I do that? It's always a problem. I believe that this is one, or maybe not. I'm looking for... Why is this so hard? Teespring. Very difficult when you're trying to find things and listings and all of that. I am looking... I know it's taking me a minute. Just hold, please. All right. Here is a listing, but you can... Here's the T-shirts, but you can find the hoodies. Oh, wait a minute. Why am I having a problem? Why am I having a problem here? I don't understand. You know what? I'll have to do this. I'll have to do this in a minute. But they're there. You can, if you go to the Teespring store that's on the YouTube channel, it's underneath all the YouTube videos. You can find it. I don't know why this is giving me... It's sending me into my stores, but I'm trying to find a link for you. I can't. I've failed. Super Surreal. And but if you go underneath any of our things, there is merch underneath, and you should find the Robservations. If it just says T-shirt, you can still log in, and it gives you all the different designs, so you can check that out. By the way, they're great shirts, I promise. Sci-fi Author sends in a tip and says, in 1,000 years, human will have combined into one sexless gender. When a couple or more want a child, their combined DNA will be coded with specific traits and placed in an artificial placenta where their child will develop independent of the parents. Yes, that's transhumanism, all of that stuff. I completely believe you're correct in that assessment. Completely believe that. And why isn't that part of Star Trek? Wouldn't that be interesting? And what about all the story potential for that? Instead, we actually have a character explain. We have a non-binary character tell a gay man to call her by, or call him, her, like her pronoun, his pronouns, their pronouns. I don't even know. That was very confusing to find out that our characters in the show demanded that using pronouns was something that you were going to tell a non-binary person was going to tell a gay man in the 32nd century, I prefer these pronouns. Like, really? By then, nobody would care. As a matter of fact, like I said, people would be changing their genders, and like sci-fi authors said, we'd be living in a very, very different world, and human sexuality would be very different than it is now, and that would be the whole interesting thing about making a show 1,000 years in the future. They did none of that. Instead, we have a female crime boss, and the only thing edgy about that is like a former Orion is now a female. It was so uninteresting. Sheriff Carl says, "Good, Rob, good. I can feel your anger. It's about to snow up in here in the Seattle area, and I'm ready for that fat rail of WandaVision cocaine. Woohoo! Call Pat Benatar, because I'm all fired up. Any crazy predictions for episode 6? 6 is for Satan? I don't know, man. I don't know, Sheriff Carl. I let it flow over me. Midnight tonight, baby. Midnight tonight." Brendan Sheehy says, "Rob, I hear a lot of people complain that no new franchises are being born with the constant mining of the nostalgic past. Does the MCU get any credit as an original film franchise? Yes, they glean from the comics, but isn't there a milieu original in film terms?" Yes, I totally agree with that. Yes, it is. And you are correct. And I am with you 100%. Actually, I forgot to put down. I wasn't showing that. Let's see. Here's one. This one comes from Chloe. Hello, Chloe. Chloe says, "Hello, Rob. I'm not usually a letter writer, to say the least. Most of the time, I can just say everything I need to say in a tip or two, but this time, I just wanted to ponder a bit, flex the mind a little, but most of all, give you in the chat a little fat to chew over on this on. In your opinion, what is a popular TV show? What makes a popular TV show? To most people, right off the bat, would be The Office. Some may even say Friends or Seinfeld, and of course, let's not forget all about the Star Trek shows, the older ones at that. But here's where the unpopular opinion comes in, sneaking around the corner. Always there, even though most don't want to see it. You still know it's there, sort of like that one person at work you always avoid. But just as you turn that corner, there they are, staring at you, knowing that they have you in their sights now. And yes, the TV show I'm talking about is The Kardashians. Love them or hate them, all 19 years of them. But here's where the popular comes in at. Not the Nielsen ratings or even the greatest show of all time, but if you were to say, ask strangers on the street to name a cast of a TV show, 9 out of 10, a person would be able to name you the cast of The Kardashians over most of your TV shows, simply because they know exactly how to market themselves. For when you have just as much haters as you do fans, they're still in one way or another in your mind, but that is how they set their TV show up. I know that you cannot really compare the Kardashians' TV shows to others, but they know exactly how to market themselves. For example, Kylie and Kendall Jenner have more followers on social media, 125 million followers each, more than any other movie or TV star in the limelight at any given time. And that is marketing at its best. Love them or hate them, you have to acknowledge the fact they have made themselves famous worldwide and a fortune to boot by simply knowing how and when to market themselves. Chloe, you're absolutely right. I mean, I guess the Kardashians are like what Lenny Nero was selling to people in Strange Days. Real life, but better. I mean, the Kardashians, look, you've got they have a dream life with they're rich And even though they're rich, they are filthy rich, but at the same time, they go through the same soap opera shenanigans most people go through in their own lives, but they do it like in one show in 30 minutes. They have more drama than we have in weeks of our lives, and it's all put into, or I don't know, it's a half an hour, one confection. I don't know. And I mean, it's irresistible. It's irresistible to watch them. I get it. I mean, it's amazing to look at them. It kind of bums me out because let's face it. Most people are not imagination connoisseurs. Most people lead lives of quiet desperation. They're just trying to feed their families and find some bit of happiness in their lives, feel like they belong, feel like their lives matter. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people who Donald Trump appealed to. Donald Trump appealed to the regular, everyday person, and Donald Trump kind of felt more like a regular, I know this seems silly to say, but I'm sure he felt more like a regular, everyday person that was more relatable than a lot of these stuffy politicians, career politicians in Washington, D.C. Trump didn't talk like a politician. He talked like somebody you'd meet shopping for groceries or going to the gas station or whatever. He had a populist appeal, and that's why a lot of people voted for him, and that's what they were looking for. And, I understand that. And his message was a populist one, and that's why people liked him. I think the Kardashians, in a way, they combined the same thing that Trump combined. The idea that, well, even though you're filthy rich, you're basically a normal person just like me, and maybe through osmosis or supporting you or whatever, I too will get to do or get to be or get to experience what you have in your life. And that's, I think, the key to both the Kardashians and the Trump successes. Why should anybody watch those entitled kids or now grown-ups do anything? Well, because they could be me. I think that's what it is. It's wish fulfillment, or we're hoping that maybe if we dream it, we'll be the Kardashians ourselves. I mean, it's hard to say, but that's kind of the way I always saw it. And they do a hell of a job of marketing. Who doesn't want to be left out? I don't want to be left out, Lubna Khan, our own Lubna Khan is here. I love that name. Hello. Again, I'm sharing a few things we've watched recently that I've enjoyed. Florence Foster Jenkins, old school charm and wit. I adored the dialogue, along with some subjects and themes that would not have been touched on in a film from the period. Madame Florence is portrayed affectionately rather than mockingly, indeed often movingly. She could easily have come across as merely a pitiful figure of fun, but she does not. Even though I knew the outcome toward the end, I was really anxious that she not see that negative review. Do you do that? For example, seeing as I prefer happy endings, my favorite Shakespeare play is obviously Hamlet, wherein any character of any consequence, except possibly Horatio, dies. Each time I watch, I hope that this time things will turn out differently. But alas, they never do. Even Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. The Golden Bowl, based on the Henry James novel, which I've not read, so I cannot speak to the fidelity of this as an adaptation, though my impression is that Merchant Ivory productions tend toward being faithful to the source material. Though, I will say I was quite taken aback by the overly dramatic beginning of the film. Granted, I've only read a handful of Henry James books, but action-packed is not the way I describe them. After this disconcertingly bewildering beginning, however, things settled down into a more wanted Henry Jamesian mode. Yes, I get what they're going for. I simply disagree with the choice. The scene was so out of keeping with the rest of the film. Toward the end, I was grateful that this was not a Thomas Hardy story, or things would have ended badly indeed. Beauty and the Beast, the Disney live-action remake. The original is one of my favorite Disney animated films, along with probably Robin Hood and the Aristocats. I may not have loved this as much, but I still found it quite charming and delightful. Lubna. P.S. Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite fairy tales anyway. Other examples being East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and Rose Red and Snow White. Have you seen the Cocteau version of Beauty and the Beast from the 40s in black and white? I highly recommend it. I have it on Blu-ray. I do love fairy tales. To fellow fans and those wishing to explore fairy tales, I heartily recommend Andrew Lang's Fairy Tale Collections. The first few books are quite Eurocentric, with the occasional Arabian Nights type story thrown in, but subsequent volumes really do encompass fairy tales from all over the world. Both these similarities and differences are, to me, equally fascinating. Well, Lubna, thank you. That's I always like hearing what people have to say about what they've watched and things that they like and all of that. And you know what? I'm going to finish today off with a letter from Omar94. Hi, Rob, moderators, and Post-Geek Singularity. Something I always get a little confused about with some movies is the time span, which sometimes makes me question the continuity. There are 3 examples which come to mind when I was thinking about this. The first is in the original Godfather. After Vito Corleone is shot, Michael Corleone gets hit in the face where it's swollen and he has a black eye. Somehow he has a swollen face and black eye for a long period of time as he hides in Sicily, meets Apollonia, marries her, then sees her die. During that time, he still has the swollen face, which just becomes a black eye when he marries her and sees her die. Then when he returns to America after hiding in Sicily, he then reunites with Kay and asks her to marry him. However, a few scenes later, it's shown he has a son with Kay. Every time I see The Godfather, I always scratch my head about those things, since the continuity is a bit all over the place in those scenes. I don't know if it's so much as continuity as it is just how time is being... it's inconsistent with how much time passes in various sequences. The second is Rocky V. From The Godfather to Rocky V. Rocky V came out 5 years after Rocky IV, but it only takes place right after the end of the 4th film. Rocky's son in the 4th film was only 9, but is then a teenager in the 5th film. That always confuses me because I just felt a kid could have been recast to maintain the timeline and continuity. The third is the James Bond series. In On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond marries, but his wife is killed at the end. Spoiler alert. Throughout the rest of the other films, that gets brought up a few times. I don't remember which one, but one of the Roger Moore movies has a scene at the beginning where he visits his wife's grave. That would be For Your Eyes Only, which said she died in the 60s, but the film takes place in the 80s. In License to Kill, Felix Leiter explains to his wife how Bond was once married. Those are just examples where I question the continuity and the timeline of the Bond series. There is no continuity or timeline of the Bond series. I mean, how many Felix Leiters are there? How many? How many Blofelds are there? There's continuity, schmontinuity. Those 3 examples are what I mean when I get confused by continuity in movies. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, thank you, Omar. Always refreshing to read your letters. But you're right. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There is no continuity in those movies, so it's tough. It's tough. Everything is a little wacky in those films. But yeah, Godfather, that's a good example. I always thought that when he got hit in the face, like he might have shattered his cheek or something. That's why it takes so long to heal. But yeah. Chris Gilfillan. Gilfillan? Chris Gilfillan. It's interesting because Chris Gilfillan. I like that. It's good. That sounds good. Been finding myself, sends in a super chat, says, been finding myself tuning in for a good dose of verisimilitude on the daily. Good stuff, Rob. Well, Chris, thanks for tuning in and thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate that. Claudius is here. Our man Claudius. Monsieur Robert. I don't think some viewers truly understand your position on Star Trek Discovery. I agree. To me, Star Trek Discovery isn't science fiction. It's actually fantasy. Yes, it is. Please elaborate while Interstellar and Arrival are science fiction and Star Wars is not. Oh, man, I was going to get off this stream, too. Okay. Here's the difference between science fiction and fantasy, or science fantasy. They call Star Wars science fantasy. The thing about science fiction is usually the stories are derived from whether it's technology. It's an extrapolation of what could be. For instance, Interstellar deals a lot with literally stellar mechanics. The idea, the physics behind black holes, for instance, and what stories could be derived out of those things. We don't know the actual ins and outs of we don't know if it's all true, but the stories are based on extrapolations of real science and things like that. Like what happens, what happens when you're by a black hole, and there's the time dilation happens, where suddenly the time for you is passing much slower than it is on, say, than outside of that the realm of a black hole. If that theory is proved correct by going into or being in the proximity of a black hole, you might come out and 50 years have passed by on Earth when it seems like only moments have passed by for you. Now, that's a very science fiction concept. Suddenly your wife is 50 years older than you are, but all of those story beats are based in either real science or extrapolations of maybe not you're like the idea of a matter transporter. Now, that's probably never going to happen, and it was done as a simple, elegant way to solve the problem of having a spaceship ferry our characters to and from the Enterprise. But it could. I mean, maybe there are things that break down, but the idea is that's just a device to get people from one place to another. Those are using those kinds of concepts, whereas the stories in, say, Star Wars are not the storytelling. It's all based on myth, and it goes back to antiquity, as David Hemming said in Gladiator. The stories aren't necessarily derived out of science, and that's not. Look, I know you have a super weapon, a super laser on the Death Star, but that doesn't mean that's just call whatever. That's Pompeii erupting. It's just a proxy. Sure, it takes place in space, and you have the Death Star, and people would say, well, that's a science fiction concept. Well, I guess so, but the storylines, the tales that are being told, are not taken from actual science. They're based in myth, and they're based on emotion, and they're based on human interaction, as opposed to being a story that is based on human interaction with science and physics and the future and all of those things. And it's really, what is the story about? Is the story about how technology and how knowledge is affecting our characters, as opposed to being more of a fairy tale, good versus evil, princesses and princes, and those are fairy tale fantasy tropes, and they're not science fiction tropes. But that's a very quick and dirty and easy way to explain it. Whereas the story about what would happen if you go to a black hole, that's a science fiction story, because a lot of what would happen to you has a basis in real science. And science fiction is something that you can extrapolate on the world that we live in about how things could affect us, whereas fantasy is more about is more about the human imagination in terms of those kinds of tropes. Science fiction isn't so much, but there's a lot of overlap there. But Star Wars isn't a story that's based around scientific concepts, or it's not so much a what if. Like what if that were to happen? What if you went on a space mission and you came back and it was 75 years later? What would that be like for you? I mean, that's something that could potentially happen. Whereas nothing in Star Wars is going to happen to you for real. I don't know if that was a good explanation, but it's the one I've got. And on that note, I want to tell everybody. Well, I want to thank everybody, first of all, for being here. I want to thank you all for supporting the channel via tips and super chats. If you like what I do here, do that whole thing. Smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell. You know what it is. I hate that. But yes, do that. Let me give you a call to action. Go do those things for me and for you. It's better for you. It's better for me. It's better for them. Or not. I want to thank you for writing letters. If you would like to write letters to me, you can go to the Burnettwork.net website. And up in the left corner, I think it says where you can contact us. You can go contact us, send me letters, I'll read them. And, of course, you can always go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, the Whining About Movies Facebook page, the Fully Articulated Facebook page, or the Let's Get Physical Media Facebook page. And you can find the Richard and his merry band of brigands, including, but not limited to, the other moderators, like Bunyan Snipe, who's here. I don't know who else is here. Well, Onion Snipe. Justin Toner's here. I guess I hope no one left, but there you go. And Josh Levesque is here, and Greg Smith, and all my moderators, if you can find them. They will help you out. So thank you to them. And also, let's see. That's about it, I guess. What can I say? And on that note, I'm going to tell you that we are doing Whining About Movies at 7:30 tonight. We are going to be talking about Gladiator, the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, i.e. Elizabeth. She will be back, and we will talk about the greatness that is Gladiator. Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and he will have his vengeance in this life and the next. Let's talk about it tonight at 7:30. Join us there. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not on the John Campea show tomorrow. Erin is, because Erin and Tom, her husband, are staying the night at John's, and she is going to be with him live tomorrow. So I will just be back for Robservations, and who knows what else. Thank you all for being here. It's been a fun day so far broadcasting here on the Burnettwork. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And remember, watch out. Wanda Maximoff, she can put spells on you. Watch out for that, because you might not ever recover. Reality could go away forever. You never know. And on that note, I would say, have a better day.